Hey Bible lovers, I'm Tim Nichols and I'm here to bring you Nicholsworth, and today from the American Bible Society we have the synopsis of the four Gospels. And what's really cool about this image on the front is it tells you on the back that this cover design is based on representations of the four evangelists in a 15th century Armenian manuscript of the Gospels. So we have some really neat artwork on the front. And this is what really attracted me to it, was the artwork on the front. I really love this representation of the four evangelists. So now let's take a look. This is the Revised Standard Version. This is not a translation I've read yet, but this is the one I intend to read next. So I'll be looking for that on my channel soon as well. But when you open it, of course, hardback does have some reinforcement tape here, so that's really nice. But when you get into the layout, you have blue accents, and basically what this does is whenever the Gospels have a story that is in another Gospel, it's put together here. Now when it doesn't, you can see that in the Gospel of John, this story of healing the paralytic is not in there, but it is in Matthew, it is in Mark, and it is in Luke. So the synoptic Gospels often have the stories all in parallel, but sometimes John does not. But you'll see here's the story of the Lord's Prayer. It is not in Mark, but it is in Matthew, it is in Luke, and it is also not in John. So it's really neat to get a synopsis of what's in each gospel and how each story is repeated, and you have it right next to each other, so you can see each variant, you can see each version of the story, you can see each of the gospel author's rendition of the story, and then you have some notes and different things that kind of give you some further explanation here at the bottom, kind of in single column format underneath. So I just really thought this was a neat tool and something that you want to see. This has been out for years, but this has been updated. It is a rather small font. If I was guessing, I would say it's somewhere around a 7-point font, but it is a very useful tool, and you can see the footprint on this thing is pretty large. This is a big book, and as you can see, the story of the death of Judas, you see it in Matthew, but you don't see that in any other of the Gospels. So if you want a quick snapshot of all four Gospels, this is a really nice way to do it and see how their stories parallel and see how their stories kind of work out together, see how the details are the same, see which details are different, because each gospel writer had their own angle on the story and reveals different details. A couple other things they sent that I thought were really cool is this Restoring Hope Bible. And what this does, this is the Good News translation. I've never read this translation and it's not on my slate to read anytime soon. But what this does is it highlights portions that are already pre-highlighted where there's been trauma, or where there's been restoration, or where there's been hope. So it kind of gives you some things that you can read along the way that shows you kind of how God's people were flawed and how they made mistakes, but yet how God still redeemed them. In the middle, once you get past the Psalms and right before the Proverbs, it has this little section where it deals with different emotions and different things that you may experience in life, experiencing trauma, the healing process, being a good listener. It gives you some tips on how to help people get through trauma and pain, and just all sorts of information on how to handle this. Laments in the Bible. Create your own lament, so they give you an opportunity to write your own kind of prayer of lament. Why is there suffering and evil in the world? And they explain it by Satan, human choice, and we lived in damaged creation because of the fall of man. Bring your pain to the cross. So it's really, really neat. Then it shows you trauma and healing experience arc, to where you experience suffering. Then you are heard, moving all the way to resilience. Explore trauma in the Bible, and then questions for studying passages and stories, and then some character studies. So you have some study options. And then there's 3 7-day reading plans to help you through certain emotions and different things like that. And then diving deeper, some other character profiles, people that have experienced trauma, like Joseph, for example. Just all sorts of nice little resources when you've suffered a disaster like a hurricane or anything like that. And then we're back into the Proverbs. And then when you get to the New Testament, this is a double column layout. This is a paperback, so it's going to be an inexpensive option, but it's also going to be a glued binding. Once you get into this is the Faith and Liberty Bible. Now, I'm always a little bit weirded out about patriotic Bibles because many of them tend to paint America as kind of this new Jerusalem and new option to redeem God's plan. I do not believe Jerusalem's been replaced by anybody or Israel's been replaced by anybody, but this is neat. It has a lot of patriotic stories, really nice layout. This does appear to be a glued binding. It has an interesting colored text. It almost looks blue, but I do think that's black, but it's definitely not the same blackness that I'm used to. Like I said, almost gives me this blue vibe to it, but every now and then you'll see articles and different things throughout it where it has different patriotic leaders, like the writing of Amazing Grace. John Quincy Adams is featured in this very heavily. And then when you get to the New Testament, you can see other little articles, and this is a black letter text. I don't know what the font size of this is, but the paper is crazy. This is really thick, almost book-like thick paper. It doesn't appear to be line matched, but it absolutely does not matter because this paper is so thick and opaque. There is no ghosting whatsoever. This is really nice in that aspect. So, American Bible Society does some really neat things. I recommend that you check them out. God bless you. Keep calm. Jesus on. This is your Wigglesworth.